Claire Shipman is the co-author of The Confidence Code and more recently, The Confidence Code for Girls. Both books look at where confidence comes from and how we can actually build it. Claire is also the co-author of Womenomics, Write Your Own Rules for Success. Womenomics and The Confidence Code have both been New York Times bestsellers, and I suspect The Confidence Code for Girls isn't far behind. Claire is a former television journalist at ABC, NBC, and CNN. She holds undergraduate and graduate degrees from Columbia University. Claire, welcome to She Said, She Said.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled.
We are so delighted to have you, and I am a big fan of both the Confidence Code and the Confidence Code for Girls, but really the Confidence Code, and have used it in leadership seminars and a course that I teach. I mean, it really is fantastic, and I sort of felt like it broke new ground.
Well, that's so flattering. I'm learning to accept compliments. That's part of the Confidence Code.
It's hard to
Thank
do.
you. I know. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
Yes.
You're very welcome. So why the focus on confidence? How did this come about?
You know, Katty and I had written a book a few years before the Confidence Code about women in work. And one of the things we were struck by, and really we focused on all this great data that I'm sure you know about, the more women at the top of companies, the more money, but we were struck by what we were finding when we would interview a lot of women who looked incredibly successful to us. And they would say things like, I'm about to get a promotion and I'm not sure I'm ready. My bosses want me to do this. I don't think I'm qualified. I'm a fraud. What? Because of course, Katty and I thought, well, we have these thoughts, but we thought we were the only ones who have these thoughts. And we just...
And these are really successful people.
Really successful people. I mean, people to us who looked like just, there would be no question they were confident.
Give me an example.
Well, there was a woman who was working as a senior executive at a car company in Detroit, a top manager, a woman in New York who's a fairly senior investment banker. I mean, people who'd achieved kind of the traditional milestones, especially in the corporate world, that always seemed to us hard to achieve. And we just thought we need to do digging and find out, is this anecdotal or is there something really going on here? Is there actually a gap? And when we started digging and we found a lot of the data, that's when we knew, wow, this is really something worth exploring.
Mm-hmm. What was the most surprising part of this? Obviously, you knew you had something, but as you began to dig into the data, what surprised you most?
A couple of things. I think one, what surprised us was the regularity with which women underestimate themselves. I remember one professor said to us when she wants to give her graduate students some sort of study to conduct just for experience, and she knows what the result will be, she sends them out to give men and women a scientific reasoning test. You ask the women how they've performed. They every time underestimate how they've performed. The men routinely overestimate how they've performed. And this skewing where the women underestimate and the men overestimate, and that's been studied too, this overconfidence on the part of men really struck us, that this was so clear. And I think the other thing that struck us was the notion that we found with the studies of one professor at Berkeley, Cameron Anderson, that in many cases, confidence is as important as competence in terms of success in the workplace. And that kind of shocked us at first, and we sort of thought it was horrible because women, we're all about being competent. But then we started to understand that it's a skill. Confidence can be viewed as a skill, and we just thought it was important for women to understand that.
Another question about the differences between men and women and the way that this information is sort of interpreted. How much of it is how we process versus there really being a difference in terms of how confident we are?
I mean, we got heavily into the science for our adult book because there is so much biology now, genetics, neuroscience in terms of, the science of our personalities. So we set out saying, do men have a confidence gene that women don't have, basically, which we didn't think we would find. We did find that a large part of confidence is genetic, which we thought was interesting, slightly frightening. But what we found is that, and there's not a difference in terms of the genetics with men and women, right? So the genes they know affect confidence are evenly distributed. in terms of gender. But what we did find is the way our brains function can be quite different. And I think that's, I guess, the one scientist who studies confidence in rats at Cold Spring Harbor was fascinating. And we really tried to drill down into this with him. And he explained, so it's not that men look at risks and say, that's a crazy risk, I'm going to take it. I just feel, it's literally that the way they're processing that risk is different than the way we are. So what I came to understand is very often women view the world around us and assess the risks around us in a very different way. And that can lead to a feeling of less confidence.
Mm-hmm. So I loved reading about you and Caddy Kay, your co-author,
yes.
Right in the Confidence Code, about going through this process of having your own DNA
yes.
tested. And to be clear, for those who don't know, you're both incredibly successful, accomplished women, very accomplished in journalism. How could you not be confident? And yet, what did you find out?
That we're basket cases in terms of genetic confidence. We of course thought, this will be a great gimmick. Let's just get our genes tested. And then we got the results back and we thought, oh no, we failed a test. We're imperfect. But it helped us to realize the other part of confidence that's so incredible, which is that, of course, part of it may be hereditary, but part of it's volitional. Part of it we do create. And we realized that we had created it over the course of our lifetimes. Like, we still lack confidence. We talk about it in the book. I mean, I'm a perfectionist. That can inhibit, confidence. So we both lack confidence still in a lot of ways. And we talk about it in the book. I'm a perfectionist, and that can inhibit confidence. Caddy sometimes confesses to me she thinks she's successful because of her British accent. Just crazy things.
It is nice to have a British accent.
It does help. Okay, that's
doesn't
fair.
Hurt anything.
That's fair. But what we found is when you look at the field of neuroscience and brain plasticity now, and what they're realizing, we really can rewire our brains, even at 30, 40, 50. And when we change our thinking habits, we are in the process of rewiring our brains. So when we're telling you can build more confidence, you can almost literally see that happen. And I think that's what got us through that depressing news about our genetics.
Yeah. Well, but even given that those results, it doesn't seem to have held either of you back particularly, right? You're both very successful, accomplished people. So how would you have been different, do you think?
Well, I think that's a great question. And so, and it gets to the heart of this issue, which I talked about earlier, which is that, there are all these successful women out there who don't sound confident. So does it matter? I think we would still argue yes, because I think I can look at in certain areas of my life and realize I would have done more things. I would have done different things had I not been so focused on being right all the time and being risk averse. I think I might have been a little more creative. I probably would have branched out in different ways. And I think that's one area that where even when women are successful, we don't know how much more successful we might have been or happy with what we're doing. But the other part of it really is, it's just hard to feel a lack of confidence. It's not fun to process things that way. So I think then it has to do with our inner lives and what we're experiencing. And it's just not obviously as fulfilling to experience success when we doubt ourselves all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dig into this notion of brain plasticity. I love the idea of this because it really is about you being in the driver's seat, right? You have control to some degree over how this works. So talk a little bit about what that means and ways that people can sort of make themselves more confident.
We were really focused on, all right, what's the formula for confidence? How do we break it down? And as best as we could discover, the formula is simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy. So it really has to do with taking risks, doing some failing, persevering, mastering something ultimately, and it's this cycle. So it's really interesting, actually. One professor explained to us, confidence actually is what turns our thoughts into action. So confidence isn't just, I feel great about myself, right? That's self-esteem. I feel I'm a valid human being. I should be here. Confidence is, I'm thinking about doing something and then that's the stuff that lets us actually then go do it, which involves a little bit of a risk, right? So confidence greases the wheels, as it were. But it's a virtuous circle. So doing creates more confidence. So once you get going, you're building up a stockpile. So risk-taking and action, those things can be really hard for all of us. I think for a lot of women, risk-taking will look different for everybody. We talk to a lot of women for whom, of course, speaking up in meetings is a big risk. That's always an issue. Some people are more introverts than others. Some women feel rightly more intimidated when they're the only woman in a room and they have to speak up. And there's a lot of data about that. Some women just have trouble. We talk to successful women who are senior executives. One partner at a law firm said, I just have trouble making decisions every day because I think every decision needs to be 100% perfect. And then I refuse to make them. And then I have 100 people waiting for me. And she said she had to create a rule for herself that 90% of her decisions would be good, 10% would be wrong, and she just would have to deal with the fallout. But that mental trick lets her just decide and move on. So sometimes it's about being less perfectionistic. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to identify where is it that you're unwilling to take risks in life, and then start small and allow yourself to start to get used to failing, essentially.
Do you think it changes over time? This woman who's very senior in a law firm clearly has had to make a lot of decisions over the course of her career. Right. So did it become more difficult for her? Did she, is it something that maybe happens at different points, sort of different peaks and valleys over the course of your lifetime? Like, what do you think about that?
Well, what we found is that we did a confidence quiz when we released our adult book. We created a quiz online, and an enormous number of women took it. We created it with a couple of academics, and I don't think they've ever seen this amount of data. I thought they'd get 1,000 people, and I think 50,000 people took the quiz or something.
Fantastic.
So it's crazy.
We use it in
great.
my class too.
And we found that in general, women's confidence does slightly grow over time, right? There's this low at puberty, which is why we wrote the girls' book, but then it slightly grows over time. I think showing that women do learn a lot, right? We learn eventually to take risks, ideally, and to move through it. But there is also situational confidence. And I think for a lot of women, there are periods in their lives when they have troughs. For a lot of women, it might be taking time out of the workplace, trying to get back in, where you just don't feel, that you've had that practice again. And a lot of it really does come down to just the experiencing over and over and putting, the willingness to put yourself out there. We were talking to a woman the other day who said, well, we want to create all these programs, but so many women think they almost need to go back and get a master's degree before they can go back to work because they want a credential because they're not confident enough that what they know is going to work.
It's so fascinating. Okay, let's pivot and talk about the confidence code for girls. As you thought about this, so you're the mother of 2 children. You have a son who's older and a daughter who's younger. How much did your experience with your daughter enter into your desire to write about confidence for younger girls?
It's funny. It really was not the driving force, although I've learned so much from it. I think we were thinking, what do we want to do next? Because the book did really well, and we thought about other things for adult women, but we really got fixated on this notion that confidence drops pretty severely for girls at puberty, and why that is. And just for example, girls tend to drop out of competitive sports at 6 times the rate boys do. And competitive sports is one of the few things that's been shown to clearly give people a boost in their careers. Other things would too, but competitive sports is just kind of a no-brainer. Yeah. So we were just like, what if we could get in there at that moment and help girls understand the power of risk-taking and failure, and help them avoid the trap of perfectionism. And I was seeing some of that with my daughter, but oddly, she's a real tomboy. And so for a while I thought, I'm immune to this because she's a tomboy. Well, boy, was I wrong. She's a tomboy, but she has all of the perfectionism. She has and this all started pouring out as I was writing the book. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to do debate. I'm no good at it. I have no idea how to do it. It's just this. And I would look at my son and be like, yeah, Mom, I got it. I'm fine. And literally at one point he said to me, it was the third or fourth test in middle school that he'd gotten back where he's like, I did so well. You know, he'd get it back B minus, C plus or something. He's like, I've noticed that I tend to think I'm always going to do better than I do. And the girls in my class are always worried and they do really well. And I said, oh, interesting. You know.
How do you begin to socialize these, or sort of at what age do you begin to socialize these topics with your kids, with your female children in particular, but really with both kids?
You know, I think, well, they're a little, for me, it's hard because they're sick of hearing me. If you say the word research one more time, stop. You know, I feel like I've probably turned them off of this notion just by being involved myself. But I think it's tricky with girls because Caddy and I have realized, and we've been talking to girls since the book came out.
And she also has a daughter?
She has two daughters. One who's just graduated from college and one who's 12. And we don't want girls to think, oh my gosh, some gloomy, horrible thing is approaching and we're all going to catch the no confidence disease, right? And so instead, what we've tried to do is talk to them about the benefits of risk-taking and the exciting parts of it, and let them see there's an alternative to having to be the good girl and get everything right all of the time, and understand why that quest for perfectionism, I think, is just not worth it. And so we try to have casual conversations about it. Mm-hmm. It's hard, kids want to listen when they want to listen and otherwise not at all.
Yeah. But it's so interesting how early these sort of thoughts seem to trickle in. Our daughter is only 8 years old, and I see this tendency toward perfectionism already, and I see this tendency toward, well, maybe I just won't do that. She's 8.
Right.
She's, not too far from puberty, but far enough that I'm a little surprised that she's already beginning to think along these terms. So,
well, it's actually for 8 to 12-year-old girls. So we picked that age because it's really at 8 is when we start to see the drop happen. Mm-hmm. And we did a poll with this great company, Y-Pulse, and they're used to talking to parents and their kids, and this was done in a really sophisticated way. We found so many interesting things. One, that parents all over the place like you get shocked when they see their daughters who, at age 6, 7 are like wildly confident, right? And then where does this hesitation come from? Also, interestingly, that dads are better at spotting a lack of confidence in their daughters often than moms.
Wow.
And we think, and the pollster thinks it's because it's even stranger for dads to see. They don't recognize that, right? Women, we often recognize those feelings and we think, oh yeah, that does seem risky. And so we're not viewing the behavior often as odd.
Mm-hmm. It's so normal to us.
Yes, it's normal. And we kind of think, oh, that's not great. But we also understand it because we went through it. And so dads, I think, can be a real asset in this if they can get engaged on it and kind of just challenge your daughters to do things that are outside of their comfort zone. And the failure has to be just, who cares?
Yeah. Let's talk about how you retooled the Confidence Code to turn it into the Confidence Code for Girls, because it's, the content is there, but it's structured differently. You've got quizzes. So talk a little bit about how you structured the book and how difficult was that?
It was harder than we thought. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think our publisher thought, oh, wow, just boom, turn it around. And of course we thought, being slightly perfectionistic, said, well, no, we want the girls to actually like this book, right? We don't want to just sell it to the parents. We want girls to not be bored stiff. Mm-hmm. So we worked with some cognitive behavioral therapists. We actually worked with a writer who's written for tweens before too, to find, just help us with the voice. But what we realized is what really engages kids at this age is quizzes, scenarios. Here's the scenario where so-and-so and the sleepover happens and, which is the confident choice. And so we have a lot of those sorts of things and less expository, let us tell you about confidence, kids, and here's what you should know. And so we tried that. We have it's illustrated. We have graphic novel panels because we think those are a great way to lay out scenarios for girls too. And then we have stories of real girls who have done confident things, but not girls like Malala, who are awesome, but just out of reach for all, my 13-year-old. It's like, yeah, well, am I really going to do that? But we have, girls who are trying to box in a headscarf, or who campaign to have free tampons in a girl's locker room, or just things that are accessible and that help them see what they might be able to do.
Yeah. What are the most important takeaways for parents related to raising their daughters, and to some extent maybe their sons?
So I think I think it's really tricky, because I think we live in a culture right now that is so pressurized, and especially as you'll see with your kids, it just, the whole sort of getting good grades, getting into college. So, and we are literally preaching anti-perfectionism. And so that's at odds with everything has to be perfect, everything. And so I think for parents to understand that it's very easy to give into this, get good grades, do everything right all the time, but that for girls especially, it can be just a horrible kind of disease, because they're not figuring out who they are. They're not learning to fail and take risks. And the fact of the matter is, the standards in the workplace are utterly different. So we were just writing a piece about it for The Atlantic, and it feels to me like a big bait and switch, that we have this educational system, parents, teachers, we're all sort of right up through college. It's just do well, do well, do well, do perfectly, please everybody, do everything just right, don't fail. And then you're out in the workplace, and guess what? Oh, it's totally different. Take risks, fail, keep going. And girls have internalized all this stuff, and it's not what they need. And boys, of course, try as they might, haven't really internalized it, because they just can't do it as well. Mm-hmm. So they've naturally learned along the way to fail and mess up, and they've built confidence.
Mm-hmm. I often feel like the terminology should be, you need sort of different words for perfection and failure. Perfection's really a bad thing. Failure's actually really a good thing.
Right.
And yet the words that you're conditioned to sort of strive for perfection and avoid failure, it's completely the reverse.
We thought about that too, because some people said to us, don't use the word failure because it's so negative. It's not failure. I said, I know, but it's a shorthand people understand. Because girls, especially at this age, are so prone to the melodrama and the, oh my God, they're so awful. It's a complete fail. And they understand it and the drama of it. And the more they can see that you just recover and you move on. And I think for me as a parent, what's great about it is it's liberating. If you can know as your child is striking out at bat for the 10th time, or bringing home a bad grade, or a fight with a friend, and they move through it, your first instinct is to suffer for them and then fix it. But if you can also tell yourself, oh God, they're learning such an important lesson right now, it helps you get through it too.
It's so hard to be a parent.
It is
it's
the
so
hardest
hard
thing.
to do that. Oh my goodness.
It's the hardest thing.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Now that you have this incredible knowledge and perspective, having studied this topic, how do you think your career might have been different?
That's so interesting. I don't, it's hard. It is hard to think back on it and pick out what I might have done differently. I mean, I've always liked telling stories. So I'm happy I ended up in journalism. I think, and I give this example a lot in speeches, that when I think about how do I lack confidence, for years when I was on political talk shows, I was often the only woman on a panel, or say on the George Stephanopoulos show. And I always had this sense that I was talking less than the male panelists. And I went back before our first book came out, and I had an intern help me just measure the talk time. And I had on average talked 30% less than the men.
No kidding.
Largely because I felt I had to only say exactly what was right, what I had prepared for, only answer the question. I wasn't going to answer George's question and then say something else I might want to say, right? That would be presumptuous, right? But the men were just talking all over the place. And, and I realized that was a metaphor for me for what did I hold myself back from? Was it different sorts of pieces, different sorts of reporting? I agonized for a long time, for almost a year, about moving on from the White House beat. Maybe I would have, I think there are a lot of things that I might have pursued that might not have been radically different, but certainly would have made me feel calmer and less anxious all the time.
Yeah.
With more confidence.
As you think big picture, about your career, about these three, actually, amazing books that you've written. What impact do you hope all of this will have on others and on the world?
I have to try not to just crumple up in a ball and say, what? These little books? It's so hard. I still find it hard when people come up to me and say, your book really helped me. I literally break into a sweat. I'm like, what? Really? What? I'm going to go hide under my covers.
You need to just accept this. They really are great
hard.
books.
I guess I like the idea of starting a conversation. So I'm a really not a black and white person, and I love throwing this out there, but understanding there's more to learn. Did we get every single point right in the book? Probably not. Is there more to know, especially about boys? Absolutely. And I think I hope people will start to look at this and think about, I guess, especially in terms of confidence and the way we raise girls, what could we be doing differently on the kind of social, emotional education front? Because I really do think, to be very concrete, that, the pressure on kids these days and the pressure to succeed and do it in a way that's just allows for almost no failure, for boys and girls, by the way, is really unhealthy. And I think if we could understand this, how to build resilience and confidence, and we made that more of a focus than getting everything right on the test, we'd be raising a much stronger generation of kids. But the other thing I hope is that we get a lot more women running things. That's my long-term goal.
Amen.
Because I think the more women in charge, the better world we're going to have.
So let's talk about that long-term goal. What's next? Are you focused on what's next? What are you working on currently?
We are just talking about that. I mean, the book only came out 6 weeks ago, so we're still thinking about this book and what we want to get this book ideally into schools. We think it would be a useful tool, but we're thinking about is there some way we could support something like Running Start, this great organization that trains young women to run for office, and could we help with that at an even younger age and start to get girls more confident in their own voices? I've been thinking a lot about boys. I think boys right now need a lot of help and guidance given everything that's happening. I don't think they know what's expected of them. Mm-hmm. They don't talk about their feelings as much. So I'd love to see a focus on that. I don't know whether that's us or not, but we're mulling.
That's fantastic. In the Confidence Code for Girls, one of the great exercises, at least I thought it was one of the great exercises, is to write down your top 5 risks. So 5 risks that are not, like jumping off of a cliff necessarily, but smart risk that you might take. What about for you? What are 5 risks for you as you think about some of these great questions?
That's a great question in general. I am pretty cautious, even though I've written these books and I've tried to learn from it. So it feels risky to me. It felt risky to me to write a book in the first place. It felt very risky to me to have the audacity to write a book for girls. We're starting to speak at schools. That feels incredibly risky to me because I just keep thinking, how am I qualified to do this? I guess thinking about whether we start some sort of organization, that would feel like a risk to me. Could I do that? I'm an introvert, and so there's a lot that feels risky to me about starting something and leading it and trying to figure out how to deal with that. So I think that's something I'm trying to wrestle with a little bit.
How did your collaboration with Caddy come about in the first place, and what made you good collaborators?
Oh, I think, one, it's fun to work with somebody. I feel so lucky we did this together. I don't know that I would have had not just the nerve, but I don't know that I ever would have turned in a manuscript because, of course, I'm also a procrastinator. So we work well together because Caddy is not a procrastinator. So I'd be the one saying, well, but we really need the perfect thesis. And she'd say, okay, I'm done with chapter 1 and I'm moving on to chapter 3. And I'd say, what? Oh my gosh. And then I would feel I had to jump into action. And we just had a great back and forth that way that I think kept things moving forward. Caddy and I, almost immediately after we first met, we were at a cocktail party and we both were comparing notes about how we loved our TV jobs, but basically just we're always hoping for days off or days when we weren't called to work and that we didn't have to go to work the next day. And we realized, we're like, God, are we the only two TV journalists who want less time on television and we want to be doing something else too? And so I think when we had this idea about the way we work and the way we try to juggle things with kids, which was our first book, it just seemed very natural. And we thought, let's try this. Who knows? And it's been a great partnership. Yeah. Really fun.
Yeah. Well, you seem very similar in many respects in terms of the way that you approach the world and this notion of confidence. Your DNA results were somewhat similar as well.
Yes, that was
kind of interesting.
That was interesting because I wouldn't have thought that. I assumed Caddy had super confident genes, and I thought, I'll be the anxious one. But we both had a really similar profile, and it's just. But temperamentally, I think it helps when you have a partner because, number one, it means I'm not obsessing with my husband about stuff, which saves our marriage, which is really useful, and it just keeps you motivated.
One thing that I think is so curious is the fact that you have had this successful career. There must have been things that you inherently were doing to boost your confidence that parallels with the research that you found. Have you thought about what it was, even though you felt underconfident? Right. Your DNA says you may not have been the most confident person in the room, but clearly you were putting one foot in front of the other and you continued to move forward.
I know, I do think about that. My sister said to me at one point when our second book came out, I can't remember if it was our second or first, and we were talking about rule breaking, something in the book, and I remember she stood up and she made a test and she's like, well, that's you've always broken the rules. And I thought, I have? I didn't realize that. And so maybe I do think there's part of me that was driven and that I haven't been worried about convention so much. And so I think that's helped, that I have had a sense I can do things. I think that the reason I think I felt less than confident has to do a lot with this perfectionism and this feeling that I'm always falling short. Mm-hmm. I'm capable, but I could be doing it 100 times better. And so I think that's just limiting. I think that the experience of just getting out and doing things and trying them, I have certainly learned confidence doing that. And I also had, in a lot of ways, we didn't grow up with a lot of money. I had to work in high school if I wanted to buy new sweaters or and so some of just the life stuff, when you have those experiences, that does teach you confidence, right? Because you're just being handed these opportunities.
Yeah, maybe a little fear of failure, perhaps, too.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Anything I've missed? Any big
this has been so
topics?
Great. I think that one thing that is that a lot of people ask about with kids and girls especially is social media. Mm. And what about confidence and social media? And I would say that we try to approach it in the book in a really realistic way. Social media is not going to go away, but we tried to talk to girls about pitfalls to avoid and also how to use it in a positive way. But I think what parents should understand is that at puberty, in addition to feeling a confidence drop, this sense of often of rumination and overthinking, that's when that kicks in, right at puberty. So imagine these poor girls, they have no idea what's going on in their brains and they're overthinking everything. And what social media does on top of that is just doubles down on that.
Fuel. Right.
It's just fuel. And one teacher said to us at one point, in the olden days, you'd have a fight with your friend at school, you'd come home, and there'd be a natural break. You could have 8 hours without dealing with it. Not anymore. It's just you can deal with it incessantly. And so we try to give them some tools for knowing when to really get off of it and put it away, but also how you can find positive outlets on social media, because there are great ways for kids to find people like them on social media, to connect with them, and say, look, it's a tool, use it well. And I think if parents can support that, it's a better direction.
Yeah, that's great advice. We always ask everyone who comes on the podcast for sort of a single piece of advice or a life hack, something that's maybe your mantra or something that you share with other people. You've given us lots of advice already, but is there one single thing that's been your driving force, or that's become your driving force, or something that
it's funny. Well, we have a mantra with our book, which is do more, which means risk more, think less, and be authentic. So we have a big part about, look, being yourself is the way you're going to be the most confident. And I like that for shorthand, but I also like something some young girl came up to me and told me about a year ago at a conference. She said, well, when I just think I'm not going to do something, I do what my dad told me, which is I do it afraid. So just
do it anyway.
Do it afraid. And in other words, don't fake it till you make it. Don't try to pretend you shouldn't be afraid. So a lot of things in life are frightening, but do what I think a lot of men do, which is just, ooh, it looks horrible, and I'm going to do it anyway. So I've been using that a lot, whether it comes to sending an email I find frightening, or it's just like, oh, I don't like that, but I'm just going to do it afraid. And so I think recognize the feeling and move on.
Yeah. Claire, thank you.
Oh,
this was
pleasure.
awesome.
Thank you, Laura.
A pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. It was really fun.
Thank you. To learn more about Claire, go to our website at www.shesaidshesaidpodcast.com. There you'll find her bio, links to all of her terrific books, and much, much more. And if you're enjoying She Said, She Said, we want to hear from you. Please leave your feedback. Please subscribe. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher, as well as on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you so much for listening.